John was a sheep farmer who lived alone in a small cabin nestled in the hills of his vast farm. His life was simple, and he enjoyed the peace and quiet of the countryside. He had never believed in monsters or anything like that. That was about to change. One night, John was awakened by the sound of his sheep bleating loudly. Concerned, he quickly put on his clothes and went outside to investigate. What he saw chilled him to the bone. There was a large shadow standing over a herd of his sheep. The closer he got, the clearer it became that the shadow was not an ordinary creature. It was a Dogman, a creature that he had only heard about in stories. The Dogman was bigger than any wolf or dog he had ever seen. It stood on two legs and had the head of a terrifying wolf, its yellow eyes glinting in the darkness, and his fur was a matted mess. John's heart raced as he saw the Dogman snatch up one of the large sheep and jump over the fence, running into the woods. He was terrified and ran back into his cabin as fast as he could. He locked the door behind him and waited for daylight. The next night, John heard scratching at his window. He was afraid to look, but he couldn't resist the urge to see what was outside. He slowly made his way towards the window and peeked through the curtain. The sight that greeted him was terrifying. The Dogman was standing on the other side of the glass, his snarling face inches away from his. Its breath fogged up the window, and its claws scraped against the glass, threatening it to break through. John screamed in terror and backed away from the window, praying that the creature wouldn't break through and get him. The rest of the night, John huddled in the corner of his cabin, too afraid to move. He didn't know what to do or who to turn to for help. He knew that the Dogman would come back, and he was afraid that he would not survive another encounter. From that night on, John never slept peacefully. Every night, he heard the scratching at his window, and he knew that the Dogman was waiting for him. He never ventured outside after dark, and always kept his doors and windows locked. John knew that he was no match for the Dogman, and he feared for his life every single day. It was a cold and eerie night when Emily moved into her new apartment complex. She was thrilled to finally have a place of her own, but as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She dismissed it as paranoia and drifted off to sleep, only to be awakened by a strange noise outside her window. She listened intently, but it was silent again. Emily got out of bed and walked to the window to investigate. She peered out into the darkness, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. She was about to turn around and head back to bed when she heard a faint scratching noise. Emily's heart raced as she realized the noise was coming from her front door. She tiptoed to the door and peered through the peephole, but there was nothing there. She let out a sigh of relief and turned to head back to bed when she heard the noise again, this time louder and more persistent. Emily opened the door, expecting to see a stray animal or maybe even a burglar, but instead, she saw something she could never have imagined. Standing in front of her was a creature unlike anything she had ever seen before. It was a dog woman standing on two legs with a snarling mouth full of sharp teeth and glowing red eyes. Emily's blood ran cold as she backed away from the creature, but it was too late. The dog woman lunged forward, snatching Emily in its jaws and dragging her out into the night. The residents of the apartment complex woke up to the sounds of Emily's screams, but by the time they reached the door, She was gone without a trace. The police were called, but they dismissed the story as a hoax or the ravings of a disturbed individual. However, the residents knew the truth. They had seen the creature lurking around the complex at night, watching them from the shadows. They knew that they were not safe, and the dog woman was still out there, waiting to strike again. As the weeks passed, more and more people disappeared from the apartment complex, and the residents grew increasingly paranoid. They organized neighborhood watches and patrols, but it was no use. The dog woman was always one step ahead. It wasn't until a group of residents stumbled upon an abandoned laboratory that they discovered the truth behind the dog woman. The laboratory had been conducting experiments on animals, splicing their DNA with that of humans in the attempt to create the ultimate soldier. But the experiments had gone horribly wrong, and the dog woman was the result. She had escaped the laboratory and was now on the loose, hunting and killing innocent people. The residents knew that they had to put an end to the dog woman's reign of terror, but they didn't know how. It wasn't until one brave resident proposed a plan to lure the creature into a trap that they saw a glimmer of hope. The plan was risky, but the residents had no other choice. They created a fake human scent and placed it in a nearby park, hoping to lure the dog woman out into the open. It worked, and the creature fell right into their trap. And with the help of the police, the residents were able to capture the dog woman and turn her over to authorities. The laboratory was shut down, and the residents were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that they were safe once again. But they could never forget the horror of what they had experienced. The memory of the dog woman would haunt them forever, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked in the dark. It was just another ordinary night in the city, with streets lined with neon lights and the sound of cars honking in the distance. But little did anyone know that something sinister was lurking in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. Sarah was walking home from work when she saw something strange in the alleyway. It was a large, shadowy figure standing on two legs like a man, but with the head of a terrifying wolf. She froze in fear as the creature turned its head and looked directly at her with its glowing eyes. Sarah's heart raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. It couldn't be real, could it? She tried to run, but her legs felt like jelly, and she stumbled and fell. The creature slowly advanced towards her, its claws clicking against the pavement. And as the creature approached her, Sarah could see the immense size and muscle of the dog man. His fur was matted, and his teeth were razor sharp. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her throat. Suddenly, a loud noise interrupted the silence of the night, and the dog man turned his head and ran off into the darkness. Sarah scrambled to her feet, still in shock from the encounter. She knew she had to tell someone what she had seen, but who would believe her? Now the next day, the news was buzzing with reports of a dogman sighting in the city. People were skeptical, but Sarah knew what she had seen. She tried to tell the authorities, but they dismissed her as crazy. Days turned into weeks, and the dogman sightings continued. People were afraid to go out at night, and rumors of the creature's existence spread like wildfire. Some even claimed to have seen the dogman attacking people and animals in the city. Sarah knew that the authorities needed to take action, but no one seemed to listen. It was as if the dogman was invisible, and no one wanted to acknowledge his presence. Eventually, the sightings stopped, and the city went back to its normal routine. But Sarah could never forget what she had seen. She knew that the dogman was still out there, waiting to be discovered once again, and she could only hope that next time, people would believe her and take the necessary precautions to protect themselves from the terrifying creature that lurked in the shadows. In a small town nestled deep in the forest, there were whispers of a creature that haunted the woods at night. It was said to be a dogman with the body of a muscular man and the head of a terrifying wolf. Many people had reported seeing the creature, but most dismissed it as a mere urban legend. However, one night, a group of teenagers decided to venture into the woods to see if the rumors were true. As they walked deeper into the forest, the air grew colder and the trees became denser. Suddenly, they heard a howl in the distance, but it sounded much deeper. The group froze in fear, unsure of what to do, but then they heard something moving in the bushes. Suddenly, the dogman emerged from the shadows, baring its sharp teeth. The teenagers screamed and tried to run, but the creature was too fast. It pounced on them one by one, tearing them apart with its powerful jaws. Soon, the forest fell silent again, except for the sound of the dogman's howling. After that night, no one dared to venture off into the woods again. The legend of the dogman became more widespread, and parents warned their children not to wander into the forest alone, or they would become the creature's next prey. Some even claimed that the dogman was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim.